Anybody else get a good fortune tonight? Yeah. You will be audited by the IRS. I always had this dream, if I was a rich, eccentric man, which this is the reason why God's never made me rich, I would make fortune cookies that say, the most common name I don't know at the time is John, and it'd say, John, call your mother immediately. Sooner or later, John is going to open it up, and he's going to be shaking, I have to call his mom. I think, you'd never see it, but it would happen. It would be so worth it for that. Anybody, what do you got, Linda? Oh, that's a word for the night, huh?
Mine says, help me, please.
What about anybody on this table? What'd you guys get? It's horrible?
Yes. Work on improving your exercise routine.
You don't claim it, huh? All right, one more. Anybody else? What'd you guys get in the back corner? Dave, did you open yours already? He's chewing. We'll wait, Dave. Hey, while Dave is chewing and keeping us all in suspense, just so you guys know, next month, it's Thanksgiving, the end. So what we do we call it our holiday group. We merged the November-December group together. So it's the first Thursday of December. So I believe it's December 6th or something like that. And what we're going to do that night is going to be different than other nights. It's going to be a drop-off night for you guys to be able to drop your kiddos off. We'll have Christmas party stuff here for them. And then you guys can go, and we don't care what you do. You can go take a nap. You can go shopping. You can go to Starbucks. You can take a walk. It's December 2nd. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kyle. The only thing is you have to come back. That's it. So I'd ask that you guys would register for that as soon as you can, because that night we're gonna definitely need to make sure we may have to cap it at a certain number of kids if there's a response that's greater than our typical group people. So usually drop-off nights, that tends to happen. So want to make sure you guys get first dibs on those spots. So right when you see it, make sure you register your kiddos for that if you can, okay? That would help us. All right, Tiffany, are you ready? All right, is Tiana live? There she is. Hey, Tiana. How are you? She's talking. Hang on.
I'm muted.
Yep, there you are.
Hello.
I'm muted you're muted as like 2020, 21, like the phrase of the year, huh?
I agree. I 100% agree. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, more than okay. It's perfect.
That's real strange that I can see myself on a screen as I see you guys in the room, but we're going to work through it.
All right, so just so everybody knows, a couple of logistics on this. There's a little webcam right here, so everybody wave to Tiana. Can you see everybody waving? And is that that's our only camera, Tiff? Okay. Oh, yeah, and then we have this one over here, so you can turn and look that way, and everybody wave at that one. And then if there's any time for question answers, then we'll pass the mic around so she can hear. So you can't, you don't raise your hand, just start talking. I have to come to you or she won't be able to hear you, okay? All right, Tiana, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. It's so awesome to think that, you can be in San Diego and we can be here in Clovis and you can impart your wisdom to us. So we so appreciate you cutting out time of your life to be able to stop and just pour into all of our families. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. Good evening. I am Tiana Hopkins. I'll give y'all a little spill about who I am before we jump in. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I currently work as a clinical supervisor at the YMCA down here in San Diego. But I am very familiar with Action Church. My family, I was born and raised in Fresno and was there up until about, when did I move? About 2 years ago. So I'm super excited to be able to support tonight and talk to you guys. So tonight, what we're gonna go over is a parent survival toolkit, and more so, not just for the parents, but also kind of ways to support your kiddos through really hard times. I know I was just telling someone earlier this afternoon that like from 2019 till now, all kind of feels like a blur. It all feels like one long year. And there's been lots of changes and lots of things that we've had to adjust to as people and as kids and as families. And so hopefully some of this might feel like review for some of you, but hopefully it's just the really good reminders of ways that we can be kind of present and supportive of our youth. I'm going to share my screen, so hopefully this works. We'll see. We might have to do some adjusting. Can you guys see this okay? A thumbs up. We're okay? Okay, good. All right. Let me move. Parent Survival Toolkit, Navigating Through Rough Times. Helpful reminders of ways that you can help yourself and your children cope through challenging times. So there are 5 key kind of items or kind of images that I want you guys to keep in mind. Now, you might have some of these things on your tables. So there's 5 of them. There's an outlet or like a little electrical board, platelet. There should be a mirror. There should be bandages or gauze, Velcro, and then also like a rock of some sort. And so these are going to be the 5 different items that I'm going to talk through a little bit and talk a little bit about how we can use those as symbols, as some reminders of things that we should be mindful of as we kind of focus ourselves and try to reground and recenter after some chaotic times that we might be experiencing. All right, so let's jump right in. The very first slide, let's see, why is mine not working? All right, is an outlet. Can we see this okay? Let me put I apologize, my screen is moving very slow this afternoon. There we go. An outlet. So as you can imagine, so think about, I purposely chose this image as both a literal and a metaphorical reminder of we need outlets for a lot of this stress that we're experiencing, but also a recharge. We deplete ourselves of energy, emotional energy. We deplete ourselves of the things that bring us joy. If you've ever heard the analogy of like filling your cup. If we are only focused on the needs of our kids or our family, and we give up everything that makes us who we are or also fills our cup, then much like your phone, right? Hundreds of dollars, these little devices that we love so much. But if we let this go dead, there ain't much use to it. There's not much else it can give us once it's depleted completely. And we kind of function like that as people too. If we are not recharging our energies, reprioritizing our needs as parents, as adults, then what do we have left to give to our families and our kids? And so just as a reminder, keeping your outlets, your socialization, your professional experiences, the things that bring you joy in your life is equally as important as the things of recharging for your kids and an outlet for them as well. Our emotional capacity is not infinite, right? And neither are our kids. We run out of steam, and so do they. And so reminding ourselves that having an outlet and being able to have these areas of recharge is not only important for our minors, but also for ourselves. And I did leave time at the end for questions. So if you are having questions throughout this presentation, please hold them to the end, kind of like Jason said. But I am mindful of the time, and I do want to leave time for questions at the end. Things that might need a recharge in our lives are patience, right? If you are recognizing, man, my patience level has really been struggling, you might need a recharge. Your energy. Right? I think that one's our most obvious ones. That's the one that we most easily recognize as needing to be recharged, right? I am tired. Your physical and emotional energy. Our coping and self-care needs. I don't know about you guys, but when I get stressed out, the first thing that goes is the ways that I take care of myself. Why that is, I don't know. I don't know why we're structured like that as people, but when we lose sight of the things that make us happy, the things that bring us joy, the things that help us regulate. And it's not until we are completely depleted that it's like, oh, right, those things are helpful. So just being mindful before they go to E, continuously giving yourself that recharge, that coping skill, that self-care needs. Marriage. Man, parenting does a number on marriages sometimes. And so sometimes if you are finding you and yourself and your partner having a hard time connecting, having a hard time being on the same page, maybe it's time for a recharge. And we'll talk a little bit in a couple of slides about what that actually looks like. And then connections. We lose track of our friend groups, our family members that we used to talk to all the time, the things that help us remind us as adults that we are still human beings, a part of a bigger system outside of just parenting our kids. And so even for our kids, the biggest thing that kind of stood out to me throughout the whole quarantine, and we're still kind of navigating through some of that stuff, is lack of connection, right? And just our kids not having as many social outings or being able to hang out with same age peers, things like that. We need to make sure that we're navigating through that, because that does play a role in our ability to function and our abilities to cope. Just having those peer connections, both as adults and our kids, is incredibly necessary, especially when we're thinking about it from this lens of returning to baseline. So as we continue through the 5 different things, thinking about it from the lens of when in crisis or when in these valleys, these difficult times that we navigate through quite often. So these aren't necessarily tools that you would use. I mean, you could be using them at any point in time, but specifically keeping in mind how we navigate through these things in those times of crisis, or in those times of, I think peaks and valleys is one of the things that I use a lot. So in those valleys, when things are just feeling real difficult and unmanageable. Signs you and your child might need a recharge, right? So difficulty following multi-step directions. Our brains, it's like a mason jar. Some of our mason jars are much bigger. Some of our mason jars are much smaller. But at the end of the day, the mason jar is going to fill up. And when those things fill up, we start to lose access to some of our higher functioning skills, both as adults and kids. Kids' jars are probably a little smaller than ours as adults, because we have life experiences and skill sets that have kind of built that in us. But when the cup has runneth over, it's really hard to access those higher functioning skills, such as multi-step directions, chaotic emotional responses. If you ever you ask your child or your spouse or whoever it may be a very simple question, and you get this response, you're like, oh, that seemed kind of unnecessary. Well, maybe that's an indicator that we need a recharge, right? Because if our cup is runneth over, we're also not accessing our abilities to stay within kind of our window of tolerance, or in our comfort zone, or our baseline of behaviors. Along with that is oftentimes we get these opposite actions, right? Really rigid thinking, but then also very impulsive or aggressive. And so when you're starting to experience these things, not only in yourself, because we as adults can be rigid, right? You forcing your kid to wear that one pair of shoes, and when you kind of look back at it, you're like, they really could have worn whatever shoe. It really didn't matter at the end of the day, right? We get into these really rigid thinking patterns, impulsivity, right? Making rash decisions, aggression, screaming, yelling as parents, and recognizing in yourself, like, I don't know why I'm acting like this. Well, that might be a really good indicator that it's time to look at a recharge or a reset. When we're navigating through this concept of recharge and reset, think about it like you do your cell phone, right? If I want my phone to charge, but I keep pulling it off the charger, it's never going to charge. So this recharge really does need to be intentional, and it takes some time to actually build that charge back up. So it's not, okay, well, go outside and play for 5 minutes and come back, and now I'm expecting you to be completely better, right? If I send my phone on the charger for 5 minutes, I'm going to get maybe 1% or 2% up, not a whole functioning amount of energy. So just be mindful of those things, especially as we navigate throughout the rest of the slides. The window of tolerance. Now, this might be an image some of you have seen or you've heard of, but the reason I threw it into the presentation is because it really does talk about this concept of when we need to be recognizing a recharge is necessary. So I'll briefly go through it. If you have further questions about it, please ask me at the end. I don't want to spend a ton of time, but it is kind of a busy document. But essentially what it says is this yellow zone in the middle is our comfort zone. It's where we experience our abilities of psychological flexibility. Children operate out of a window of tolerance as well. So when our psychological flexibility is on and it's working well and we're in our comfort zone, we're able to be emotionally regulated, your abilities to self-soothe. At the very, very bottom, it says staying within your window of tolerance allows for better relationship interactions. Well, sure, think about it. If I'm able to manage my own emotions, if I'm able to self-soothe in the moment, if I'm able to stay calm, collected, connected, and cool, which is what it says right in that middle space, then I'm much more capable of navigating through challenges. I'm much more capable of hearing and processing multiple step directions, much more capable of sitting in things I don't like as much. So how do we pop out? So this little green box to what would be my left essentially says what causes us to pop out of our window of tolerance is this feeling of unsafety, is bodily feelings of abandonment, rejection, trauma-related beliefs about self. So if you, and then the bottom one says emotional and psychological dysregulation. And so once we've popped out of this window of tolerance for whatever reason, whatever the trigger is, both as adult and minor, we enter into one of these two phases. Hyperarousal, which is the pink at the top, which is directly connected to our fight and flight responses. If you understand kind of our fight, flight, freeze, flop, feign, that we've added a couple of F's along the way over the course of the years. But essentially, the things that once you've popped out of your window of tolerance, this is where we start to see a lot of these behaviors: anxiety, chaotic responses, aggression or emotions, anger, rage, rigidity, OCD symptoms, addictions, impulsivities. And then the kind of opposite action of that would be our hypoarousal, which is going to be our freeze response. These are going to be our kiddos who kind of aren't capable of using their words, or ourselves, where we freeze, we dissociate. For adults, a lot of times it goes into autopilot. You're just going through the motions of the day. You're not actually present or making connections. So what the window of tolerance says, and this is a document that was designed specifically to address how the brain functions in trauma and anxiety related responses to triggers. And so what it says is, when you have popped out of your window of tolerance, you've entered into one of these phases of this chaotic state or these aroused states. And at that point, the only goal is to get back into your window of tolerance, not to correct the behavior in that moment. And this is where we often kind of flop as people and as parents, is we see the rigidity and we become more aggressive is the word that's coming to my mind, but that's not what it is, right? We become more rigid, more strict. We try to put more rules in place in an effort for structure, oftentimes. But what that really is doing is pushing our kiddos and ourselves further into these hyperarousal states. And so the number one goal is to get us back into the window of tolerance. Once we are emotionally regulated, then we address the behavior. If you are addressing the behavior without helping the child or yourself get back into your window of tolerance, you're not actually correcting the behavior itself. And so we see this repetitive cycle of over and over and over chaotic responses, anxious responses, impulsivity. Well, the real issue is that we haven't developed the skills to get back into our window. And that's where we want to really focus. And so from this concept of recharge, right, the orange category is that recharge piece, mindfulness, being present in the here and now, grounding exercises, self-care, self-soothing, deep breathing. These are the things, giving options of other choices, our new choices. These are the things that take us from this hyper or hypo-aroused state and bring us back into our window of tolerance. And once we are regulated and we have this psychological flexibility, that is where growth occurs. And so if you're experiencing, specifically with our littles, if we're noticing, man, we're just not grasping this concept of behavior, or we're still having these chaotic responses, shift your priority into looking into, how do I get my kid back into this window of tolerance? When's the last time they were even there? If your kiddos have experienced high levels of trauma or attachment or chaotic behaviors in their life, a lot of times they just ping pong. They miss the window and they just ping pong back and forth between hyper and hypo aroused states, right? Even as adults, we often are either anxious or on autopilot, overwhelmed or disconnected, right? And so really navigating for yourself as well. What is my window? What do I look like when I am emotionally regulated? What do I feel like when I'm able to self-soothe? And really being mindful of those things. Healthy Mind Platter is a really cool image and one of my favorite tools that I use quite often in my work about understanding how to offer these options to get back in the window of tolerance for ourselves and for our littles, right? So if we're struggling with behaviors and we're having a hard time pulling out the wheel and saying, okay, what are our needs? Connecting time, right? Connecting with other people in natural spaces, at parks, at school, at events, at church functions, really allows for our emotions to have positive interactions, which creates this kind of stability and baseline for our window of tolerance, and just understanding connection. Sleep. I think that's one of the more obvious ones. Without sleep, our brains and bodies literally grow the most during those times. And so if we're not getting enough sleep, your brain is not able to fully function the way it needs to. Physical time, same thing. We understand our body's got to move. That's what it's designed for. It's got to have some motion to it. It's good for our cardiovascular systems. And it also helps the brain grow by enhancing memory and reducing stress, right? Downtime. I think this one is the most underrated of all of kind of our Healthy Mind Platter. Oftentimes we overschedule. Let's make sure they have all of these events. Let's make sure they've got sports and extracurriculars and socializing and, all of these different pieces. But where is the time to not focus on anything? Where is the time to recharge the brain, to not have to be engaged or connected to one particular activity or one particular experience, a sport or karate or whatever it may be. So making sure you're adding downtime into your lives, into your daily schedules for yourself and for your youth. Yeah, I like the picture of downtime. It's got a little teacup. I don't know if you guys can quite see it on your screen, but it's got a little cup with some tea in it. And I like that one because I feel like that one's directly for the adults. Even just taking a moment and sitting and letting your brain free thought over a cup of coffee or over a cup of tea, that can be considered our downtime. Focus time, right? This is our abilities to stay connected to one particular activity without getting distracted or without multitasking. Man, I feel like it's hard for me, and I don't have children, but I feel like it's hard for me not to multitask. There's all these different things in my brain that I want to connect to and I want to do and do all these different pieces all these different times. And in my brain, I'm like, oh, that's a skill. It takes talent to multitask. But in reality, not allowing your brain to focus on one entity increases stress, and it actually decreases your ability to make connections and to understand and to grow. And so even with our kiddos, where are we giving them opportunities to just focus on one task, right? A puzzle. I hate to say it, and I'm even still worried about saying it, but even something like a video game, maybe an educational board game, or an hour on a video game where they're able to just focus on that one thing without disruption or distraction, helps reduce stress and strengthens connections in the brain. So again, we're thinking about a need for a recharge. We're thinking about we're depleted. How are we building these skills back in? We're focused, and this is where we use those things, right? Everything's really chaotic. We're all dysregulated. We're all depleted. We need a recharge and we need an outlet. Here are some options. Playtime, time in, and time in. Right, time in for us adults might not always look like connecting with another person. Oftentimes, time in with our littles is about sitting and connecting, but also allowing our children to have alone in time, allowing yourself to reflect internally on your thoughts, sensations, emotions, and being mindful of the moment. What it helps is it creates this ability to better integrate your thoughts and feelings together when you can focus on it in the moment. Yoga is a beautiful kind of concept for that. Mindfulness, Pilates, if you like a little bit more movement, even getting space, meditation. If you can get your kids to meditate or take a moment just to breathe and feel their bodies, absolutely integrating that into these moments of chaos. And then playtime. We all understand the value of play. We work really hard to offer our kids the space to play because we know how helpful it is in creating new connections in the brain. Our next kind of image is a mirror. So like a mirror, what we do in a mirror is we kind of look at our own selves as what are our needs and how are we impacting the situation that's happening in the moment. So mirroring and mimicking of emotional expression is a large part of social development for our kids. And so when you're experiencing behaviors with your minors or your littles, ask yourself these questions. Are my behaviors consistent? Am I showing consistently how that emotion should be handled or managed? Have I taught the skills that I'm asking for? Right? Have I explained how to navigate? Have I taught them how to navigate through frustration? Have I showed them how to healthily manage anger or sadness or irritability? Am I being a good example? Are my needs met in this moment? And then the last, is it a priority or a preference? Priority versus preference. I'll pop into the next screen because that's where we'll talk a little bit about these things. In my work, I find it really convenient to use a lot of like images and little phrases and sayings that make it easier for you to kind of pull these concepts in crisis moments. And so I threw a couple of my favorite ones here on the screen. Because they are things that sometimes we have to self-check and say, okay, how am I experiencing this particular situation? So priority over preference. If the goal is to get out of the house and get to school on time, are we prioritizing the goal or are we worried about the preference of the outfits matching, the shoes going with the shirt? Are we focused on the priority or the things that we want that situation to look like, right? Your priority for your adolescent to take the dishes out of the dishwasher, your preference that they do it without rolling their eyes or stomping off or huffing and puffing or whatever it may be. Now, keep in mind, this is in our moments of crisis. This is when we are already depleted and we're in a space of just survival mode. Sure, when we are regulated and we are in our window of tolerance, those are the moments of teaching, right? That's when we correct the eye roll and the huff and puff, maybe. But when we are in these states where we recognize in ourselves and in our minors and our littles that, you know what? We are all in need of a recharge. And so right now I'm going to focus on the priority and let the preferences go. Expectation, I'll skip over really quick because expectation versus implementation is very similar. And recognizing that, are we prioritizing the implementation of whatever that activity is we're asking, right? Getting the homework done, cleaning the room, taking a shower, taking the trash out, whatever the implementation, the thing we want them to do? Or are we requiring them to uphold our expectation of that activity? Because oftentimes the bickering, the arguing, the emotionally chaotic responses, the triggers outside of the window of tolerance are directly connected to expectation and not priority and not implementation. So in those moments, check yourself. This is a reflective exercise, right? What am I expecting in this moment? BBs versus bullets. So BBs or paintballs, if you will, they hurt. They hit you. You know that they hurt you. But they do not change you, right? Recognizing that behaviors, we should be looking at behaviors as such as well, right? Bullets, we can only take so many bullets before we are incapacitated or incapable of functioning anymore. But BBs, you can kind of take them and take them and take them. They leave bruises, they hurt, they swell up. But at the end of the day, we know we're going to be okay. When we're looking at hard times with our families, with our kids, are you experiencing that as bullets? This is never going to get better. This will always be dealing with this behavior. Why are we still in this cycle? Why is this not getting any better? Why can't they listen? Why? Bullets, bullets, bullets. BBs, we had a bad night. That's okay. There's always tomorrow. You know what? I learned from last night. I'm going to do it differently the next time. BBs, recognizing how your perception and interpretation of the situation is impacting the situation itself, impacting the behaviors itself. And checking yourself and looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, okay, how am I interacting in this moment? So how do we nurture ourselves, right? Again, kind of as I alluded to a little earlier in our outlet, taking care of us as parents, as adults, is just as imperative as taking care of our kiddos. Because if we aren't okay, how do we teach them to be okay? How do we be good images of what it looks like to be okay? And how do we teach them how to nurture themselves as adults, as people? So there's different types of self-care, and I get it. Self-care is one of those topics that can be very kind of difficult to hear. It's a kind of an eye roll most of the time when people are like, oh, take care of yourself. But the reason it's always a topic of conversation is because it really is truly imperative to our success and longevity as people. Types of self-care: emotional, right? Making sure you have emotional outlets. Physical, that's kind of, if you exercise, yoga, making sure you're eating well, your body's taken care of. Intellectual, where are we challenging ourselves at? Boredom plays a huge role in emotions. If you're like, I have not been stimulated in a while, I haven't read a book I used to love to read, I'm not reading anymore. Like, how are you nurturing yourself, even from this intellectual kind of lens? Professional, right? Professional growth, professional development. These are all things that remind us that we're still people, that we still have value as adults outside of being parents or outside of being a wife or outside of being a husband. And so really leaning into your self-care, especially in those times where we're feeling disconnected, when we're in those valleys and we're really struggling. Financial. Now, financial self-care kind of sound like, what does that even mean? But essentially it means that you're meeting your needs from whatever your financial space is. And that could be budgeting. That could be planning for a trip, saving, putting money aside because you want to take the kids to Disneyland, whatever it may be. You can nurture yourself even from that lens. Spiritual, right? Staying connected with your spirituality, regardless of what that is, and not losing sight of those needs in your world. Social, mom groups are great, donuts with dad outside of the kids being there. Interacting with other adults is huge in our success at keeping our sanity. And then environmental. So environmental is kind of like how you are interacting with the outside world, right? Are you reaching out to things that matter to you from like a socioeconomic or social justice or environmental, these things that matter to you or have mattered to you in the past? Keeping those connections helps nurture yourself and shows our minors who are learning these skills, right? Because mimicry is a huge part of social development. So if our kids are seeing us taking care of ourselves, challenging ourselves in our professions or intellect, and seeking out social engagements and talking through it as if I'm doing this for my own self-care because it's important that I take care of me so I can take care of you. And having those conversations, right? It's not enough to just say, you need to take care of yourself and do X, Y, or Z, but then there's no image or model of that from the other end. So be mindful of that. The next item on the table should be some gauze or some Band-Aids. My Band-Aids are kind of cute. Your Band-Aids might not be as cute. But the point is to remember that wounds heal. They might not heal when you want them to or how you want them to, but they do heal. And it's important to remember that if we pick at them or we obsess over our wounds, that does not make them heal faster. Think of this in the lens of trauma, right? How often do we get kind of stuck in seeing the trauma be expressed in our kids, right? Or even in ourselves. And we obsess over, oh, I got to get this. I have to get the therapy and the coaches and the this, and I have to be really rigid about this, and I have to set this boundary, or the reason they can't do this is because of this previous trauma or that or this or the other. If you start to see your minor as their history or as their experiences, then how do they ever come out of that veil, right? How do they heal from that? If we keep picking at it and obsessing over it, it does not make it heal faster. And not all behaviors are connected to old unhealed wounds or unhealed wounds. And so recognizing too that, are you approaching all behaviors under this lens of, oh, this is a wound that needs to be healed? Or is this an age appropriate behavior that just needs to be parented through? Keeping that in mind. And the reason I bring that up is because, man, that's exhausting. If every behavior, every situation that happens with your kid, we look at it from this lens of woundedness or brokenness, it's exhausting, and it feels very hopeless sometimes, or very helpless sometimes. But our kids don't experience it that way, right? They're just living their life trying to make the best of what they know. And so sometimes we have to look at it and say, you know what, this gauze, this reparative nature is going to take time, and it might not heal the way I want it to, but that's okay, because it's going to heal in a way that benefits our minor, or this child. I put on here Maslow. This is a rendition of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you've never seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can Google it. It's a really cool document, but this is my favorite rendition of it. And the reason I'm bringing this up in this particular kind of category of wound healing is because how we heal has a lot to do with our needs, right? And so if we look on to the right here, it talks about kind of that bottom layer. And the hierarchy of needs is shaped in a triangle on purpose, because that bottom, it's in layers of importance as well. That bottom layer really is our foundation, right? Water, air, sleep, shelter, kind of these normative kind of things that we think about from a physiological needs perspective. And then we bump in, once those have been secured, and then we're able to move into our safety needs. Think about this from like a reparative measure, even from like if you've broken a bone, right? You've got to go get it fixed from a physiological perspective, and then you've got to nurture it along the way, right? We protect it, we do physical therapy to grow it, we build our confidence back in using that bone, and then we're able to achieve this growth and this new skill set from this brokenness. So think about, as you're looking at kind of correcting behaviors or wounds or trauma bonds or trauma responses, start at the bottom and work your way up. Security, safety needs, right? Predictability, that's a huge one. Freedom from fear. That's the one I lean into the most. If we are still in a space of being helpless or hopeless from this fear perspective, everything is still very scary. What's happening in our child's world, very scary. How we're feeling, very scary. Then we're not able to access higher levels of growth, because we haven't been freed from this space of constantly experiencing fear. Structure, order, limits. This is where, having routine is really helpful for some of our kiddos. Having rules that are consistent is really helpful, because it creates that system of structure, because it creates that system of safety. Then we bump up a little bit into our social needs. And I think a lot of times this is where our meat and potatoes lie. This is where we so desperately want our kiddos to be at. This space of attachment, this space of connection, friendship, intimacy, love, belongingness, right? And sometimes we miss over that security piece in hopes for, or search or pushing towards social needs and social growth. But be mindful, right? Especially in moments of crisis, we need to backtrack a little bit. You might get your kiddos up to, or they've always been in this space of their social needs have been met, and then we start to have crises happen, or we start to have other experiences, and our expectation is that they maintain that same level. Maybe they're at self-actualization, right? We expect them to maintain, and even ourselves, we expect to maintain that same level. But when we need a recharge and we need to kind of go back to the drawing board, Maslow says we have to go back to the bottom. Am I sleeping? Am I eating? Do I feel safe? Is my life predictable right now? Do I have structure, safety, security, even as adults? Going backwards and saying these things, if you're feeling like some of these higher level tiers are you're not accessing those as well. And same thing with our kiddos. Take it back to the bottom. All right, let's start with a bath. Right, let's go to bed early tonight as a family. Let's move it. Let's make a new structure, a chore chart, if you will, right? It's not reinventing the wheel, it's a recharge. It's a going back and saying, we've gotten lost a little bit. Let's refocus as a family. Okay, tips for healing these wounds. How do we do it, right? We all want to know, how do we feel better for ourselves, and how do we help our kiddos feel better? Well, baby steps. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And sometimes we won't even see that healing in the 18 years that our kids are with us, or by the time our kiddos turn 18 or become adults. Sometimes that healing has to happen when they're adults, when they feel more in control of their life, when they feel more safe. And so, the expectation should not be complete healing. It should be progress towards healing. And that takes time. And there's steps, and they're tiny little steps oftentimes. With that, patience, right? Patience and persistence. Those baby steps can be exhausting, but we've got to keep doing it. We've got to keep taking those steps, even with ourselves, right? We keep with the positive reinforcements. We keep with the self-affirmations. We keep with the I'm okay, the grounding, the self-care. Even though it might not feel like it's working, even though it might feel tedious, we keep at it. We adjust our expectations. Are we having realistic expectations for the developmental and socio-emotional age of our kiddo? Are we expecting wounds to heal in a way that aren't really appropriate for that child's age or for that child's experience, or even a way that would make that child's life better or make them feel safer? Seeing setbacks as learning opportunities. I think of that one, if we're going to go with this like wound concept, right? Whenever I get a wound and it starts to heal, it gets that scab. If just a tiny corner of the scab falls off, now I feel obligated to peel the whole stupid scab off, and I got to start all over again. And now it's all sensitive and sore all over again. We often act like that in our lives when we experience setbacks, like, oh, disregard all the growth, disregard all the positive, disregard all the things that have happened leading up to the setback. And that's not helpful for healing. It's just re-injuring the wound, right? So seeing them as learning opportunities. Okay, that didn't work. That was a train wreck. Noted. What do I need to do differently the next time? How do we see it as growth? How do we see the growth in the setback? Self-care and self-compassion. Parenting is a hard job. Being a whole, well-rounded, healed adult is a lot of work. So having self-care and compassion for yourself as you're navigating through these things is healing in itself. Asking for and accepting help, right? Reaching out to your social systems, reaching out to your peers, to your families, to the people who are in your village for support, and allowing them to help you, right? Sometimes we just don't have the emotional capacity, and we need that neighbor to step in and babysit, or we need that friend to take the kids to the park for us so we can have a break. That does not make you a failure as a parent. Sometimes it feels that way, but it's just a part of the healing process. And then seeking emotional safety, especially when we're in these very emotionally chaotic spaces. Having that safe space, whether it's a journal, a friend, a confidant, a family member, whoever you feel safe with, or thing that helps you release your energies, right? Journaling, podcasting, crafting, art, whatever it is. Seeking that emotional safety and doing it often whenever you're needing this kind of access to a space to feel authentically emotional for yourself. The next thing on our list is Velcro, and we're going to talk about attachment from this lens of Velcro. And the reason I like Velcro is because this concept of what attachment actually is. It's this mutually reinforcing pattern of behavior between adult and child, or person and person, right? And so Velcro, both sides aren't the same. They're both not smooth. They're both not rigid or coarse, if you will. But they work together to create connection. They work together mutually to build this force. And so recognizing, right, much like Velcro, it's not always super attached, and it does shift, right? You can kind of peel it back. You can squish it together, kind of barely touching. And so it's okay that attachment ebbs and flows. It is natural. It is not something that is permanent or will stay exactly the same. And the reason I think attachment's important to think about, especially when we're thinking about moments of chaos or difficult challenges that we're experiencing, is as adults, we desperately want, whether they're our biological children, our adopted children, our foster youth, our family members, whoever it may be, we want them to feel connected. We want them to feel safe and secure with us. And sometimes it's a strong connection, and it's like, man, unbreakable, a little bit codependent, a little enmeshed even. And then that dissipates, right? Or it shifts. And we see that as failure, or we see it as a loss. And sometimes we even grieve those attachments, and we incorrectly try to reattach for our own needs, right? Age impacts attachment, and that's healthy. As your teens, your adolescents grow, their brains are shifting into a more independent autonomy. I was going to say automatic. I don't think that's it. They're being more autonomy. It's like, work with me here. Autonomy. They're working on building autonomy, independence, their own thoughts, their own feelings. And so they will naturally pull away. Their attachment will be a little looser. It'll be a little disorganized. They're reaching out. They're attaching. They need to make space to attach to their own thoughts, to attach socially, to attach to their own experiences, really understanding who they are. So it's very normative. And also being mindful that attachment history is not permanent. If we are experiencing a lack of detachment or a disorganized or chaotic or anxious attachment, that is not always going to be how ourselves or our children experience attachment. And that's important to remember, because, man, when we're in the throes of it, when you're in the throes of it, it feels like this will never change. We will never get to a point where this will change. Persistence, consistency, baby steps. It will. It will get better. It will grow. Now, what that growth looks like, we don't know, right? It's kind of, will it be secure? Will it have some kind of ripples in it? Will it be smooth? We don't know. But it has the capacity to change. And your attachment style impacts your minors as well. So looking at attachment, there are 4 main, if you will, types of attachment. And what I really like about this particular graph is it talks about it from this concept of model or images or experiences. So if you have experienced positive models or images of other people, and you have a positive model of yourself, then you're coming into relationships with low avoidance and low anxiety, and that creates a secure attachment. You're able to make sure your independent needs are met, but you're also able to have connection and empathy with another person because there's no fear involved, right? So then we flip it. Well, if you have a positive model of others, but you don't have very much confidence in yourself and your ability to love, connect, attach, have empathy, you don't feel confident in yourself, in that creates anxious attachment. A lot of our kiddos exist in anxious attachments. A lot of adults exist in this anxious attachment, trying too hard to get other people to see you, to forcing people almost to get your needs met. That's what you see a lot in that. Really chaotic behaviors, behaviors that don't make a lot of sense. Sometimes it feels very chaotic or emotional. That's because their sense of self is low, but they have a positive sense of what they should be or what is a good example of connection should look like. Creates an anxious attachment. What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't do it right? Avoid it, right? You have a positive model of yourself, but a negative model of others. I'm good as long as I'm by myself. I am safe as long as I'm by myself. These are going to be our fiercely independent littles, our fiercely independent adults, right? I don't need anybody. I can do it. It's fine. I don't have to talk about my feelings. I don't need that kind of support. This is an avoidant attachment. It means you've created a distrust in others, but you have confidence in yourself, right? So this is how we get to this avoidant. And then on the flip side, fearful, which is double negatives, right? You're afraid of self and you're afraid of others. So this is where we get a lot of disorganized attachment. If you have experience with reactive attachment disorder, which is RAD, if for those of you who have heard RAD, that's what that is. That is rooted in this fearful attachment, negative sense of self and negative experiences with others. I don't trust me. I also don't trust you. So what do I do? Right? It's very disorganized. It's very chaotic. It's like, I want you to love me, but I don't know how to love myself. So how can I help you love me? Be mindful of your own attachment. If I, as a parent, am an anxiously attached adult, then I might push things onto my kiddo that creates an insecure attachment or fearful or an avoidant attachment because I'm seeking my own needs in that attachment. I have good models. I know what secure attachment is supposed to look like, but maybe my own trauma background, my own experiences with connection cause me to doubt my abilities to do that. So then I push my kiddo to want to connect. I try too hard to get them to understand. Maybe you're a little bit more chaotic in your emotional responses, and that creates avoidant connection, that creates insecure connection. So be mindful of your own needs and working towards that secure attachment so that you can model that for your minors. Tips for improving attachment. Again, it seems to always come back to this expectations, right? Managing your expectation of yourself in those moments and of your kiddos in that moment. And be mindful, right? When we're in these moments of crisis, when we're really struggling, attachment is always a part of that. How are you feeling connected to another individual in that moment? And what message am I giving to my minor? Mirroring, right? What message am I giving in this moment that's either going to squish the Velcro attachment together a little bit more, making it a little bit more secure, or am I ripping it further and further apart based on how I'm acting, based on my nonverbal communication, based on the language that I'm using? Seeing the person, not the behavior. What is the motivation, right? Kind of similar to seeing the person and not the behavior. What motivates my child to behave like this? What are they seeking? What are their needs that they're trying to get met in that moment? Progress, not perfection, and then understanding your own attachment styles. All right, last but not least is the rock. Solid as a rock. No, okay. Moving on. Solid, stable, smooth, and dependable, right? Recognizing in those moments of crisis, and I particularly chose this image because it's got the little baby rock at the bottom because those are our babies. And then we are the bigger rock that protects, that is a solid space, a stable space, a space that is nurturing, that is smooth, that is gentle, and it's something we can depend on. If I'm looking around for something to sit on, I'm going to choose the big rock that seems like it can support me, not the fragile ones that look like it's going to be unsteady. Hopefully all of you have at this point the paper, the handout that has all of the different things on there. And when you look down at the rock, it says, are you offering that space of safety, of stability, of gentleness, of nurturing? Are you dependable in your responses for self-soothing or co-regulation, right? A big part of navigating through crises or tantrums or emotional chaos is this ability to stay grounded, right? And so if you're really struggling with being grounded, navigating through different tools, mindfulness is a really helpful tool. Finding little things for yourself that help you relax or help you stay grounded, deep breathing, in the moment. One of the things that I do when I'm feeling really overwhelmed, especially when I'm in like therapy sessions or things like that, is I click my hands together and I rub the center of my palm. Depending on what my need is, sometimes I stab my fingernail into my thumb or into my palm. Sometimes I rub it very gently as this nurturing, you're okay. Relax, breathe. Sometimes I will trace my fingers, but it's all in this sense to maintain stability, to maintain this presence, and be a dependable place for people to come or for your children, if you will, come and be chaotic, be emotional, be anxious. And you're able to maintain that for them, a safe, calming space for them to do that. Be the rock. Showing emotion teaches emotional intelligence. So I'm not saying to be as stoic as a rock, to be, a robot, if you will. Showing your emotion helps littles understand that emotions are okay and they're safe and they don't get you hurt and they won't hurt you. Right. And so if you're frustrated, say that, you know what, I need to take a break because I'm kind of frustrated right now. I'm going to go and get grounded or do some coping skills. I'm going to go wash my face, reacting versus responding. To react is to act out of emotion. To react is to react impulsively or act impulsively out of emotion. To respond is to act with intent. It's to act from this wise mind perspective where you're able to acknowledge the emotion, but also acknowledge the need or the rationale. So recognizing, are you in this state of consistently just reacting? It's knee-jerk, it's impulsive, it's often emotionally chaotic. Or are you responding? Are you able to maintain that space, that stability, that dependable reactions or responses for your minors in all of the situations and even for yourself? And doing in the moment grounding activities, right? This is a grounding activity for me. Deep breathing, the five senses, going through what you can taste, see, hear, smell, etc. And then focusing on co-regulation versus discipline and correction in the moment, right? Focusing on how am I mimicking regulation in this moment? Am I, right? Are you getting your kids to interact with a breathing exercise during, let's say, a crying spell or a tantrum? Are you showing the abilities to co-regulate? Are you hearing? Are you empathetic? Are you present in those moments? And if you are not able to access these things, right? Going back into that mirror and saying, what do I need to grow my skill set in some of these things? Maybe it's therapy. Maybe it's the gym. Maybe it's talking to another parent or creating a support group for yourself or coming to support nights. But recognizing that if throughout the course of this presentation, you're noticing, hey, I really struggle with this, or I really struggle with that, working on that, because those are the things that our kiddos are learning through how they experience us. So if you're emotionally chaotic, if you're not a safe space, if you're not dependable, if they're not seeing your emotions handled appropriately, where are they learning those things from? We're correcting behaviors, but also we're learning how to take care of ourselves as whole people. Stay calm, stay safe, stay present. I like this image. I pulled this off the internet because I just liked how pretty it was. But it talks about those, it's a good reminder of the five senses. Something you can see, something you can feel, something you can hear, taste, or smell and taste. When you are experiencing emotional chaos or you're feeling dysregulated, take a moment, look around the room. What can I smell? Doesn't smell like anything. What do I taste? Is my mouth dry? What can I hear? Do I hear the noises in the room? What can I feel? Can I feel my hands? Can I give myself a hug? What do I see? And then the little corner circle dude, he's breathing. Remind yourself to breathe. We as adults show up and do our very best every day. And sometimes our best needs a little support. Sometimes we need to recharge. Sometimes we need to look at ourselves in the mirror and check our own needs. Sometimes we need to recognize that maybe our attachment styles aren't where they need to be, and we need to work on creating secure attachments in our own worlds. Maybe we're recognizing that we're not allowing wounds to heal based on our behaviors. Maybe we're recognizing that we're not a stable space. And so reflecting and thinking back, okay, where do I need to grow? Where do I need to focus on my self-care so that I can show those things and teach those things to the little people that I love? Tips for staying grounded. Be curious about your emotions. Be curious about your kids' emotions. You seem to be really frustrated. Why is that? What's going on? How are you feeling? Take breaks. It's okay. Mid-tantrum. You know what? We're going to take a break. We're not going to keep arguing. We're not going to keep fighting you to clean this room right now. We're going to take a break. Transitional items, even for adults, having that thing that creates grounded, or be that rock. Maybe you have a rock that you carry around. Blankets are helpful. Teddy bears, things that create transitional objects that give us that sense of safety and security. Emotional outlets, right? Having a space to get some of that energy out, taking deep breaths, focused breathing. That's the 5 senses, or square breathing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. You count by fours. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Square breathing. All of these things help you stay grounded in the moment. And that's all I got. Any questions, concerns?
Right.
I see a hand.
Hi. With
Hi.
regard to reactive attachment disorder and a young teen, can you address what to do with balancing compassion toward the trauma that may be informing these behaviors, and some behaviors that are extreme, they're harmful to others, to themselves, and I'm not talking anything terribly physical, but disrespectful language, harmful actions, stealing. I mean, just these problem behaviors that are very disruptive to life. Addressing them in a healthy way can be tricky when they're trauma informed, and as a parent, it can be hard to balance that. So I'm looking for some advice there.
Absolutely. So let me just preface by saying that reactive attachment disorder takes a lot of work to navigate through. It takes a lot of persistence, a lot of consistency in our behaviors of creating structure and also empathy, right? So this is where you're talking about this balance becomes really, really challenging. And what I think about is thinking about what their experiences are, right? So this negative sense of self and negative distrust of others. And so working on building one or the other, building that sense of self up, building the confidence, building this, where can we show positive interaction, right? If we're looking at a lot of negative behaviors, where are there opportunities for them to see themselves in positive light? One of the things that's really hard for kiddos who are experiencing reactive attachment disorders, a lot of, and to be fair, based on their own behaviors, they get a lot of negative reinforcement. They get a lot of frustration thrown at them. They get a lot of irritability thrown at them. And so that creates that mistrust in other people even more. And so I to answer your question, it's kind of a loaded one, and it's hard to kind of put it into just one succinct sentence, but you continue to do the work. You continue to set boundaries in love, right? I'm not doing this to punish you, but stealing is illegal and can have bigger consequences, bigger than just maybe that in the moment punishment at home, right? You're teaching who are you? What kind of person do you want to be? Because we've got to build that positive sense of self in those minors, in those teens. The teenage years is when our brain, adolescence, it's when the brain starts to regrow again, right? They leave latency phase and they're starting to recreate connection. So in those moments, leaning into what do we want those connections to be? We want them to have a positive sense of self as they're redeveloping those connections, despite the chaotic behaviors. What's the priorities? We want to prioritize self-esteem. We want to prioritize empathy. We want to prioritize understanding the needs of limits and structure, not the compliance, but the understanding of the why. Why do we have rules? Why do we have structure? Because if it's only an effort for compliance and out of fear, well, what we know about reactive attachment is that that's a disorganized level of fear, and so often it's aggressive. It's not cowering away, it's pushing towards, and that it looks aggressive, it looks angry, it looks scary, but it's still fear. And so trying to navigate the priorities, what is it that we want, that new brain, what new synapses do we want to start developing, and keeping that as kind of your guideline, if you will. Okay, how do I build self-esteem in this kiddo? How do I help them understand that adults can be safe people in their life? Does that make sense? Is that helpful at all? I can see you, but I can't actually
shaking her head
see
yes.
you.
Anybody else?
Any other questions or comments? Was that helpful? Was that a waste of your hour?
Not at all.
How are you guys feeling? Oh, I see a thumb in the back. All right.
All right. All right, let's do this. Tiana, thank you so much. I thought it was just so much great content, and I believe, Tiffany, are the slides perhaps all is that online, or is that?
I can send it.
Can you send that to Tiff, and we can post it on our page, because there's a lot more content in there than our one page here. So so thank you. That was wonderful. I think what we're going to do is we have about 9 minutes left. So one of the things I was thinking through as we were going through those is like, where are those places that you need to identify to work on? Especially, I thought that one, like that long list of self-care items, it's so easy as parents to like always be on the go, neglecting what we need, to put food on the table, kids out the door, do all those things. And we realize, oh, shoot, there's 4 areas that I have absolutely neglected over the past 3 months, So what were those things maybe that you could see in there that, okay, that's something I can recognize, and talk with your group about that. And then maybe there's one more thing that was not part of the self-care, but something else that you could say, hey, here's something that Tiana said that is an immediate action step. Because, it's good if we hear things, but if we just walk out and never, oh, is she gone? Oh, okay. I was like, she's just left. We didn't even get to say goodbye. Yeah, but if we leave without creating action steps, it can just stay here. So let's kind of talk together some things we can do. So, Tiana, we will let you go. Thank you so much. Everybody, put your hands together. Bye, Tiana.
Bye. Sorry, I was trying to share it so you guys can see that list again, but I will send it out, Jason, so that Tiffany has it. It was wonderful hanging out with you guys tonight. I hope that was helpful.
No, it definitely
One of these days I will come in person, hopefully.
Yes.
I really do believe in this group, and I think it's a wonderful resource for the community.
Thank you, Tiana.
I will see you guys soon. Thank you, Jason.